let me give you a very warm welcome to another edition of The Property Show on UK Health Radio. I'm Matt Turner, and I say a warm welcome because in London right now it is freezing. I think since we last spoke we've had a little blizzard of snow. It always amazes me how London tends to shut down when this happens. Schools close and people tend to drive rather poorly. People are stuck at airports because planes cannot take off. But I'm sure this doesn't happen in Scandinavia and other sort of alpine regions. But for some reason, London cannot cope with such weather. I mean, on that, if there's any estate agents in the Caribbean or any other tropical places and you want to be on the radio, do email me and fly me out because I'd like to get out into the warm weather. Anyway, joking aside, today the show I'm talking about basements with Simon Martin. He is the director of the Crownstone Group. He talks us through the process, effectively why people are doing it and how to go about it. Later in the show, I speak to Matt Barnes. He is effectively does my job, but for commercial property. So if you're looking for office space or hot desking, he's the guy to call. Great, so today talking a bit of refurbishment. Obviously people sometimes opt not to move, and one thing that's quite prominent in London is digging out the basement. So I've managed to get Simon Martin from Crownstone Group. I say managed to get because I think he's quite a busy chap. How are you, Simon?
I'm all good, thank you.
Fantastic. So you're essentially, I know you do construction, but basements is the main thing of work for you, I guess.
Yeah, it's the main thing of what I do. I'm a building surveyor, specialise in damp defects in buildings. Obviously basements are notoriously damp, so that seems to be where most of our focus is these days.
Yeah, and obviously you're working on the commercial and the residential side.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously water doesn't care whether it's a commercial or a residential building. They both behave the same way, so the same processes for both.
I guess nature wins in the end, and it's not.
Nature always wins. The water always finds a way.
So your job is to keep that out. So I mean, obviously, people who are thinking of doing renovations, and it's in the press quite a bit. People complaining about the neighbour doing the basement, etc. Let's say I've got a house, I'm not moving. I need to get a bit more space. How do we go about it? What's the process? So I call you in, and is that right? Is that how we start? Or
yeah, that's how we start. Usually the initial conversation goes along the lines of the actual basement itself is a permitted development. You're allowed to go down one floor within the boundary of your actual building. Mm-hmm. And that is permitted development. Obviously the design still has to meet building control, but you are allowed to do it. What you need to get permission for is actually to get the natural daylight into the basement. So the light wells, because they change the outside of the building, that is what is required, the part that is required for planning permission.
Okay, so I guess you need space for that, yeah?
Yeah, and then you can either go to an architect to manage that process for you, or you can take on a building surveyor to manage the process for you. There are different ways of taking it on. We call it a procurement route. Mm-hmm. So you can either go down the traditional route, which is what most people think. I will get an architect, I will, he'll do the design for me, he or she will do the design for me, and once I've got permission, I'll find my builder. Or you can find your builder and do what's called a design and build route. So he will employ an architect for you.
So manage the whole process.
And manage the whole process, kind of like buying shoes in a shop, I suppose. It's much easier for you that way.
Okay. I suppose with a basement you can't take them back, though. Yeah?
No, you can't take them back. I mean, whether you need an architect or not for a basement, people often think that you don't, because what shape's the basement going to be? It's the same shape as your house, isn't it? So
okay,
how much design do you actually need?
You can't dig under your next door neighbour and steal some space, can you?
No, exactly. You can't.
I'm sure it's probably happened, not by you, but I'm sure there's probably some story out there. But so you said about permitted development. So obviously once you've got the planning, the plans, you submit that to the local council. Do you have to still get the council's sort of heads up on it? Their
yes,
say so.
You would let them know that you're applying for permitted development. That process is usually just a matter of weeks rather than full planning permission, which can take about 3 to 4 months.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we've got that through, and obviously from meeting me to saying yes, let's go about it. When do you actually get on site? When's the
okay? So you
part of the diggers turning up.
Yeah. So the way it goes, you have about 6 to 9 months in design.
Okay.
Then you have a couple of months in party wall. So there's you need a party wall surveys, party wall awards. For the permission to be able to dig underneath a wall that you obviously own and your neighbour owns.
So essentially
that's about 2 months.
Just a little bit on that. So that's if your house is joint to someone else's house, you're sharing that wall essentially. So permission.
Everyone knows what a semi-detached is. So the wall that divides the two buildings is owned by both of the buildings. And both of the buildings use that wall to support the building itself. So if you're going to alter that wall in any way, even talking about the other end of the building, so even if you're going to put a loft conversion on, you're still altering that wall, or you're changing the use of that wall, so you need party wall agreements. It's to cover yourself, really. It protects you, it protects your neighbour, but it's an essential part of basements, really. Interestingly, party wall is one of the only laws that is an enabling law. Most laws are you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, whereas the party wall law is you are allowed to do this, but you just have to follow this route. So it's an enabling law. So it's worthwhile an owner going down that route, because it means that your neighbour can't disagree and stop you from doing it because you've enacted the law. You're actually allowed to do it, you just have to do it in a certain way.
Sure. Okay, so you're following the process.
So that's so you got your, to recap, 6-9 months in design, 2 months in your party wall, and then you can start to dig. During that 2 months, your builder will probably start to set up the site and whatever, and the day you've got that party wall award, they can start to dig. Okay, and
I mean, any sort of residential house, technically you could be working on. I mean, is there any restrictions? There's some houses you can't work on, or is it depends on what the soil is, or what's underneath, or?
Yeah, there's.
Or is there
there are many different types of buildings, and there are a few different types of soil. Basement excavation underneath. Like a retrofit underneath the house that's existing is a bit of a London thing, really. London has really 3 types of soil. It's either ballast, which is a mixture of stone and sand, kind of gravels, they're all different sized stones, or it's clay, or it's chalk. So either one of those 3 it could be. So the designs for actually digging them basically follows those 3 rules. You don't really meet up with anything different. So it's kind of repeated designs.
Any problem, there's a solution, essentially.
And to go to your question about what type of house, all houses can have it. It's just some are more difficult than others. So older houses have a timber floor on the ground floor, which obviously timber's a lot easier to work with. We can go underneath that house and support that floor as we go, which means the owner can still stay in there. I mean, there's a good chance they'll be irritated with us at some point, because you will be living above possibly the most involved work you could ever do to a building. But it is possible to do, or you can easily change the floor. That's also possible.
So they're actually staying there. You're not lifting that floor at all. You're starting the work from one end and going underneath. Well, because the house is supported at the sides, is that?
Yeah, I mean, essentially we do what's called temporary works at the front. So a lot of older Victorian properties that we're talking about with these timber floors will have a bay window. Most of London's housing stock is like that. So. And we will support that bay and create an opening. We use the entire front garden. We lower the whole thing, and that's the entrance to our site and the exit from our site. So, like I say, the person can live in the house, but they'll definitely know we're there. When it's not quiet, it's not.
So I suppose that goes back to make sure you obviously got the neighbours' permission. They can't then come back and obviously you're working between regulated hours, but the neighbours have kind of signed up for it.
Part of the party wall and ward is to agree those working hours. And standard hours are kind of 8 till 6 and Saturday morning. Although most people don't work Saturday mornings because it's so involved to do an underpin underneath the house, you can't really do much in a few hours. So most companies don't bother. So, but that would be in the party wall award. So your neighbour would be protected, or if you are the neighbour, you would want to be protected.
I suppose. I mean, with that, I mean, do they, so you're changing the foundations essentially, or you're creating new ones, I suppose, below the house. I mean, as a neighbour, you're going to be thinking, well, I'm going to get cracks in my wall. I mean, does it happen? I mean, what's the?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that type of work would cause not defects, but it would cause hairline cracks in a building. We have tolerances that we work to. There's certain methods of underpinning that we work with, so that we reduce the risk of that cracking. That process is designed by engineers and people who are trained to do it. So everything should have been taken care of. If your builder who does the basement is experienced, if your engineer is experienced, if your architect is experienced in basements, it's very unlikely that you will get any defects from basement excavation. I
suppose in that party wall it says you have to make good any the cracks that happen anyway.
So part of it is a security. So the adjoining owner, they call it, is the correct term in party wall. So the adjoining owner is entitled to security for their house whilst you're doing the work. That security can be in the form of an insurance policy that pays out if there's a defect. It can be cash in an escrow account. It can be a charge on a property. It can be anything, kind of just to protect
that security level.
Just to give that security level.
Okay. So I mean, years ago, if you got a whole house in London, let's say, downstairs, I suppose would have been the servants' quarters or kitchen. I mean, what are people putting down in basements now? What's the common?
There's lots of stuff going down in basements. We've done swimming pools, cinemas, utility rooms, kitchens, bathrooms, bedrooms.
Okay, so it's literally
games room.
Anything. Yeah?
We're currently doing a games room at the minute, which is a golf simulator and table tennis, I believe. So. And
is that would that be like? I mean, the majority of your clients, they own the ground floor. I mean, or is it more people who own the whole house who are doing it? Or?
We have quite an equal mix of either. Yeah. Usually they are either part freeholder or complete freeholder. You can do it leasehold, but obviously you need permission to be able to do that. I would imagine that any freeholder would welcome it because you're increasing the value of their freehold.
I suppose they're probably the initial red flag goes up, thinking, oh my god, there's going to be the works and complaints, I suppose. But
there's certain ways of doing it. I mean, ultimately, if you've paid out for a lease for 99 years, you own it technically. You pretty much own it anyway.
So how deep do we go down then? Obviously you get the standard height, but I mean, what you're digging down a lot further, are you? I mean, what's the?
So we've completed double basements, triple basements.
Triple.
I've heard of 4.
Okay.
I've heard of 4 basements.
Is that so they can get their own entrance level to the tube station? Or something?
Yeah, we always say, ultimately you can go down as far as your wallet or the tube.
Okay, fine. Yeah. I mean, the wallet. What is there? How much is a basement? What's is there like?
So it goes on a
square cubic meter. I don't know. It was.
How much is a basement? How long is a piece of string?
Sure.
Kind of, But if you standard build, so it's kind of like your average residential, I suppose. You'll be looking about £3,500 per square metre.
Square metre of mud that you're lifting out, yeah? Is that what?
Yeah, that would be 3 metres deep and 1 square metre, looking at it from the top. So if you worked on that, an easy way to do it is if you measure the square meterage of your ground floor,
Yeah.
and then times that up by 3,500. That's your rough
cost.
your rough build costs. You obviously, on top of that, you would have your design team, whatever way you wanted to do that. Your legals, which
And then obviously
all
how you
have to
want the level of quality you want to fit it out with at the end, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. So, like I say, golf simulators are not cheap.
That's not
but a magnolia white bedroom is relatively simple.
Yeah.
So it really is how long is a piece of string.
Sure. So I suppose
digging a swimming pool underneath is not cheap. Yeah. So
well, I suppose for the swimming pool, I mean, just my simple brain's working here. So if you're doing one floor with a swimming pool, I guess you got to go 1.5 floors deep, have you?
Yeah. So if you
is,
a rule of thumb, for each floor you go down, you add 50%. So the first floor will be £3,500 per square metre.
Okay.
The next floor will be 3,500 per square metre plus 50%.
Right.
So each time you go down, the reason for that is the amount of equipment you need to actually get the mud out of the hole.
Okay.
Like I said, we're just going in through the front garden, so that's a very small area to go in and out of a building site, and everything has to come out of that hole.
No. Wow. Yeah. No, okay. So, and then, I mean, the time for a process like this, just a single basement, let's say, you're once you're on site.
On average, basement dig outs are about 80 square metres, I would say.
Okay.
And they take about 6 months in the shell and about 4 months in fit out.
Okay.
So you about 10 months.
Okay. So it's quite a long, lengthy process, isn't it? Actually. So.
Yeah. The lengthy process. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, about not having defects or cracks in a building, the lengthy process is there for a purpose.
Sure.
It's there to ensure that we transfer the load or the weight of the house from the old foundations to the new foundations in a way that the house doesn't move. The reason it's slow is because each time you do one underpin, that block of concrete, when it releases its water, shrinks by 2%.
Okay.
So you have to wait for that shrinking to happen before you can pack the top and apply the new foundation. So each time you do a pin, you're waiting at least 3 days before you can pack it and then move on to another one.
Okay.
So obviously we're finding other works to do in that time. We're not
just drinking tea. Yeah.
Not drinking tea for 3 days. No, that's right. Yeah.
I suppose on the flip side, any builder that comes to you and says, we'll be in and out in a few months, obviously, be worried about that because it's probably done it a bit too quick, yeah? Yeah,
exactly. And you're going to have those issues because it's a basement boom. It's not like a bit of technology that people have gone, oh, that's interesting. It's slowly followed its usual path of evolution of people catching on.
Yeah.
It's a basement boom. There's no other type of construction you can do on your building to make that kind of money come back to you. You can literally, in certain areas, double your money, more than double your money sometimes. And you can't get that advantage by doing an extension on the back or by doing a loft conversion. It's just not possible. So it is an absolute boom. Everyone's trying to do it. So everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon. But the downside to that is you've got inexperienced architects, you've got inexperienced structural engineers, inexperienced builders, and some of the horror stories that you hear are often
have you got any?
None of mine, obviously. Okay. None of mine
that you've heard about. Yeah.
Yeah, we've fixed a number.
Okay.
Of dodgy ones. But they're usually a combination of an inexperienced structural engineer and an inexperienced builder. So that plan to not crack the building never gets set up quite correctly.
Okay.
And that's where the defects come in. But yeah, we've had a number of them go wrong, people that don't know what they're doing. The worst thing you can do is to take all of the mud out to make the space and then start underpinning.
Oh right, so how's the house standing up? Well, that's
exactly. Okay. How is the house standing up? So you would imagine that someone would think that was pretty obvious.
Okay.
But there are a number of people that don't think that's obvious, and they
Wow.
Literally just undermine a building.
I quite like going to the, I've got a little boy now, so I can do it. As an adult, I go to the beach, and you'll start digging these tunnels. But I've got a little boy now, so I can do it. And it's not just me making sandcastles, but you do the digging, and you get there, and eventually it collapses. And I'm obviously not underpinning because it's just sand. But
No,
it's essentially the same thing. People are just literally doing that with real houses.
It's exactly the same thing because when you're at the beach there, what collapses that sand is the water moving through it. Okay, yeah. So it's exactly the same thing you're doing underneath a house. So your soil, if it's clay, when you dig a hole in clay, more of the clay is then exposed to the air. So the water evaporates out of the clay. That clay then cracks and then falls away from the wet clay. Okay. So as the clay dries, it pulls away from the wet clay. Same with sand. Sand behaves the same way you did on the beach. Chalk, it's just really crumbly anyway, so you can't dig very big holes without it collapsing. So it's exactly the same thing. You're exactly right.
Then let's just move on a bit. When you've got that basement, I've had the basement done, and do you have to come back every now and then? Like in a 10-year time or something? Is there any sort of time scale? Because I assume you probably have to manage that, do you? Because nature's fighting back a little bit. Water's probably trying to knock on the door, is it? What's...
Yeah, so one of the key parts of this plan at the beginning of getting your basement right is to make sure that your design team includes a certified surveyor in structural waterproofing. Okay. The reason being is because you have to understand how the soil is going to behave, how the structure is going to behave, and how much water is there to get the correct waterproofing system for the basement. It's not as easy as I'm just going to turn up and tank it. Yeah. It's not that easy. It has to be designed correctly. If you're in a very low risk area, then obviously you're unlikely to get water coming in. And
is that the low risk means that you're not near the water table? You mean?
Yeah, if you're
not right next to the River Thames kind of thing. Yeah.
If you're on the top of a hill, you're going to get rainwater pass through the outside of your basement, your soil. Mm-hmm. As the water rains, as it rains, that water will soak through the soil, touching the sides of your basement as it passes through. Mm-hmm. But that isn't any pressure. There's no pressure in that. Yeah. If you're at the bottom of the hill, the bottom of a valley, all of that rainwater will end up at the bottom of that valley and will almost act like your basement is a boat in a river. Okay. So that then has to have a bit more thought process into it, because the last thing you want is for your house to float off down the Thames.
I can see why I didn't get into this. You've got quite a lot of brain cells ticking up there. You got the information. There's my little simple analogy on the beach, but okay. So it's whereabouts it is on the
and so that surveyor at the beginning, they will look at it. If it's low risk, what type of waterproofing system you would want in a low risk area. Whether it's a new build basement, because obviously if you've got a field and you just dig a big hole and you put a basement in, it's much easier to waterproof in that scenario. Yeah. If it's a retrofit, you're going to have more weaknesses. It's more likely for water to come in, etc., etc. So you need a plan for that at the beginning. Most of the time these days, we accept the fact that water will eventually come in. Like you said, do I have to revisit it in 10 years? Yeah. Well, the actual lifespan, they say between 3 to 8 years of a retrofit basement, mm-hmm. the water will find a way in, and then it's in. Okay. And what are you going to do once the water's in? Mm-hmm. So we actually plan for that right at the beginning. Yeah. So we know for the first 3 to 8 years that we're not going to be dealing with much water at all, but that after 8 years we're going to be dealing with quite a bit of water. So once that water's in, the whole design, the common way of doing it now is to create a path for that water to a place you want the water, and then pump it out to a place that you want that water. Some people have even gone to the point of collecting that water, pumping it up into the loft and using it to flush their toilets.
Okay, yeah, well, that makes sense.
So, it's they call it a grey water system. So there are many ways of dealing with it, but essentially the main part of that waterproofing is it has to be maintainable. If you can't maintain it, then there's going to be a problem at some point.
Okay, so I suppose on that, if you're actually buying a house that's already got a basement there, I mean, your lawyer's checking out during the due diligence process, you got to see that there's been a plan put in for that, because I suppose otherwise you're going to have a bit of a headache coming.
Well, a lot of these buildings we're talking about are our old Victorian, Edwardian, Georgian stock, which had old coal cellars. Okay. So if I was to come to your house and build a basement under your house, and you wanted that as a workspace or a garage, if it was a tool shed, it would be unlikely that we need to waterproof it, because really we can have a little bit of a damp air. Your car's going to be perfectly fine in damp air. Yeah. Your car's going to be perfectly fine if there's a puddle on the floor. Sure. Obviously not if it's a metre deep, but if there's a small puddle on the floor, it's perfectly acceptable. So it kind of depends on what you're turning a building into. So if you're buying a building that has one of these old coal cellars, then there isn't essentially anything that needs to be done to it, because it's an old coal cellar. It's kind of as soon as you want to turn it into something, that's when you say, well, now we need the plan to deal with it. Yeah. Okay. So I suppose let's talk about your company. Then you must offer like a management service that you go back and you treat these basements here, or? Yeah. So we have it's Crownstone Group is our company. Yeah. So we have a surveying arm which prepares all of these essential parts for your basement. Our construction company builds the actual basement, and then our maintenance company revisits every year and cleans out the chambers underneath the basement to make sure that the pumps are always in good working order, kind of exactly the same way you would service your boiler, to ensure that your house maintains its heat. Your gas safety certificate every year, kind of thing. Exactly. Yeah. No, okay, no, great. And you working on any wonderful ones at the minute, any nice swimming pools, or Well, like I mentioned, we're doing one at the minute with the golf simulator in there, and this is quite a large one in East Finchley. That one is 110 square metres, and it's got half of it's a games room. It's got a gym down there and a bedroom and a utility room, and so that one's quite interesting. We've got a run-of-the-mill one, which is just a bedroom and a bath and an ensuite. We've got a commercial one coming up, which is a double basement, which is going to be offices. So. Okay, so and I mean, how can anyone get in contact with you? So basically, your company then, from the start, you said there were it's a full encompassing service. If I wanted a basement, I can call you. You'll take me through the planning stage. You'll do the whole lot essentially. Not that I can go away while you're doing it, because it's a 9-month process. That'd be a long holiday, wouldn't it? That would be a very long holiday. Yeah. So we can take care of it from the start right up to the end, or we can just take on a part of that. Yeah. It's a flexible service. We design our own waterproofing systems. I am a waterproofing designer, so I am one of the certified surveyors in structural waterproofing, and there are many out there. Yeah. So I design a waterproof system, we fit our waterproof system, and we maintain that waterproof system. The reason that we do it that way is it's an advantage to our client. It's not an advantage to anyone else other than the client. Mm-hmm. Imagine a scenario where something goes wrong and you haven't done it like that. You've got a designer designed the waterproof system, a fitter who fitted the waterproof system, and a separate maintenance company who's maintaining the pump. Something goes wrong, and they all just point fingers at each other, and the poor client ends up just having to pay loads more money. Yeah. So it's a bit of a duty of care towards our clients, I say, if that's the way we do that. We don't fit any waterproofing systems that we haven't designed ourselves, but we can maintain other people's waterproofing systems. No, good. So how can anyone get in contact with you? So we're Crownstone Group. Yeah. .co.uk. Yeah, and you want to put an email address out there if you want, or you're putting an email address already. Yeah, well, Simon at crownstonegroup.co.uk. Fantastic, brilliant. That's great. Well, thanks for joining us today. All Simon's details will be on the website.
If you're looking to dig your basement out and please the neighbours, let's say, give Simon a call.
Our strap line is...
Yep, tell me it.
60% of your body is water. Your home shouldn't be.
Very good. Good way to finish it. Thanks, Simon.
Cheers.
You're listening to The Property Show with Matt Turner of Astute Property Search. If you have any property-related questions that you would like to ask Matt, you can email him at matt, with 2 T's, at astutepropertysearch.co.uk.
Great, so I'm actually joined by another Matt who works for MBS Property and Recruitment. How are you, Matt?
I'm good, yourself?
Fantastic. So Matt actually works on the commercial side of property in London. So if you're out there looking for offices or workplaces, he's very much the chap to have a chat to. So how is the property commercial market going at the moment, Matt?
Within London, I guess it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, if you're looking for something like a leased property, there's very much a buyer's market, and if you're looking to sort of purchase something or work with one of the serviced office providers, it's very much a kind of seller's market.
Okay, and I suppose if you're initially just coming to London, I suppose the normal thing would be I guess you're just looking to lease something, or a hot desk, I suppose, would be the initial step before you're actually going out there to buy something. I mean, with you hear on the news like Brexit and etc., companies planning on leaving London. Is that bringing a lot of space to the market, or is it more just paper talk? I mean, how's
So it's a mixture of a little bit of both. You've got companies who are probably long established here in the UK, thinking about maybe sort of buckling down for the next sort of couple of years. So some of them are maybe moving back to their service roots. So essentially serviced offices, which were an initial step into sort of a property market, looking to sit in those for a couple of years because they offer some sort of flexibility.
Sort of less commitment, I suppose.
Yeah, and offers them the ability to scale up or scale down if they need to. Mm-hmm. But what it has created is left a lot of similar stock behind it. So the kind of sort of small, medium-sized companies up to around about 100, anything down to 20, space being kind of left behind a little bit.
Okay, no, fine. So, I mean, if we go through hot desking, let's talk about that. I mean, what's the best way to describe hot desking? I mean, if you think of the program catchphrase back in the day, I guess it'd be the picture of a desk on fire. Yeah? But what's the actual, what does it mean?
So, essentially, it's changed quite a lot. And initially, back in, when hot desking came about, sort of really 5 years ago, it was utilised as space that the larger providers had, was just overspill space that they could look to get some revenue from. Now it's very much about building communities and having space that clients can pop in and pop out from on a very short sort of commitment, very much similar to like almost gym memberships now, where you can sort of roll on a month-to-month basis.
I haven't been to the gym for a while, man. Actually, you're pulling me out there. No, sorry, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, so it is really a case of offering that sort of flexibility, but also not understanding that historically people used to consider that people wanted hot desking from a financial point of view because it was a cheaper alternative to securing a larger long-term office. But actually now it's more about that people want to work in that sort of environment. They want to be able to sit somewhere where they've got other people around them that are maybe working within the same field of them, and so that way they can sort of be collaborative with those people. Equally, for a lot of people who are maybe based in this country from a company that's based abroad, it's quite a lonely existence to be a lone wolf running around London. Sometimes it's nice to be sat in a room where other people are, and when you're making those phone calls, the noise behind you sounds like an office.
Okay, yeah.
So it gives that impression that you're a lot busier than you are, but also when you step away from home, it allows some structure to your day. So to kind of
They've got the baby screaming in the background.
Exactly that.
Which happens to be now and then, which it's quite cute if the client you're talking to has children. It's a good way in, but not very business. So it's more so hot desk is kind of a good option for sort of small entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's really changing. Whereabouts it used to be applied to people up to maybe 4 people, sort of thing. Now there are some providers in London that they've got 30, 40 members of staff from one company utilising it. And it's quite good as if you've got quite transient staff. So if you've got a sales force that are running around London and don't necessarily need to have a space all the time, it's a great way to work. I mean, from a space sort of maximisation, you should really operate, if you've got clients or employees who are in and out, you should kind of operate for 75-80% of those people to be in your building at any one time. So a lot of people now, when they take space, they look the best way to optimise the space they've got.
Yeah, no, okay. And I guess let's just say, let's take me for example. If I wanted to have a hot desk, I mean, what kind of cost is that going to be? What's the price range?
So really, very effective, cost effective from depending on what you want. So you've got drop-in lounges, which allow you to run around all over the world, UK, wherever, and they range from about £80 a month. On a 12-month commitment, or you have slightly more agile products that allow you to commit month by month, and they'll be around about sort of £150 a month and growing. And then depending on what you want, there are so many other things you can add on. So a lot of them now have gyms, additional memberships.
You're really trying to get me out to the gym now.
Yeah, so
I play football once a week. I think I'm doing all right.
So I mean, I literally been walking around town this morning with a client who's looking for a hot desk solution, and one of the things that came about was actually location was important to him, price was important to him, but it wasn't actually the main important thing. What was driving his decision was the fact that he plans a cycle to wherever he's going.
Yeah.
So when we were wandering around, it became very apparent if they had showers, if they had bike parking, it would tick boxes.
Okay.
And then equally, he's actually moving away from one of the larger providers in this market because he doesn't feel that as much. He's lost in that size of community.
So just a number.
So he was looking for something where it's a slightly smaller, more boutique sort of community that he can sort of build friends and understand who he's seeing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Okay. So I suppose. Obviously, if you're working with like-minded people in the same industry, I guess that can improve your contacts as well. Right?
Yeah, and also sometimes it's also nice people talk about the water cooler conversation, and it's really important in these environments. Sometimes you could be sat in a room or a building or meet somebody over a coffee that actually you would never have come across and doesn't necessarily seem to correlate with what your business is, but in actual fact you might find referrals or understand a connection that you would have never otherwise normally had.
Yeah, I suppose, going on from that, the water cooler or coffee, I've got to say, I just, with the show that you're going to be out on, I interviewed a chap who does basements, Simon Martin, and there was a beer tap in the office that we were in, and he actually said to me that, on Friday afternoons, he said, around 4 o'clock, they'd finish work and quite often have a beer with everyone else in the office, which I thought was quite extraordinary, and I mean that's part of the package, is it?
Yeah, so a lot of the providers will include such things as the beer taps, the coffee, etc. I mean, I actually had a client earlier in the year that was looking at one of the more traditional sort of serviced office providers versus one of the new ones, the ones with a ton of beer tap, etc. And that provider at the sort of company called WeWork was a little bit more expensive than the other option. But actually, when we did the math, was how many beers you're going to have a week, and how many times you're going to have a coffee. We worked out they only actually needed to have 1 coffee a day, and those 3 or 4 beers on that Friday. Yeah. And actually, it was a cost saving. And one of the nice things was when they were thinking about attracting staff to their organisation, when people walk around the building where they are, they're like, wow. So it really helped from their point of view. They saw the benefit from it for that little bit more kind of revenue. And I guess that's one of the things I like about what I do. And also, I guess it's quite similar to what you do in kind of sort of resi feel, is actually sometimes price isn't always the denominator, isn't always the guide. It's kind of, you have a budget in mind, but then actually your little I would like, I don't like, an essential sheet kicks in. and decides where you go.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I've just signed up a client. They were initially saying they wanted to have a gym in the building, which for me, I immediately just thought service charge is going to be quite a bit. But then I suppose it takes out that gym membership. So, like you said, you've got to weigh it up.
Plus, it takes away an excuse if you're walking past it every day.
This is true. I did say to them, I'm just going to find them a full floor walk up. That's a very estate agent term. As you're walking up to that full floor, like, we won't need to go gym membership. Kind of thing. Always the thing. Okay, so I mean, there are some very trendy kind of hot desk places out there, sort of memberships. You mentioned the global ones. I suppose ones like sort of Soho House. Would that be?
Yes, you've got Soho House, the Club House. So these are kind of almost sort of kind of like member clubs that you belong to, that you can drop into. You don't have a fixed desk, but you have the ability to walk into that community, bring a guest with you, and I think that the most common factor across all that this whole kind of movement in terms of co-working, hot desking, is the fact that you have that professional image. So if you had somebody to come and see you, if you had that kind of conversation at home, it doesn't mean you're any less professional. You're just perceived to be less professional in that setting. Where these sort of environments, it sets the agenda better. And also indicates an element of roots that you're actually,
somewhere. You've
committed to your business, so they should commit to
that's
yours.
I suppose that's very, very true. I mean, so let's say the service office sector. You're saying you've got a definite office then, and like the office we're in now. I suppose this is about 20 square meters, something like that.
Yeah.
And you take this. I mean, does it come with add-ons? I mean, do you get the internet with it, or you got to then you take the office and then you got to put all those bits in yourself? How does that work?
There are a couple of providers out there that would, they kind of have the model of some of those cheap airlines where you're paying for your bags and etc. etc.
Okay.
But they're a little bit more sort of user friendly now, where they kind of come out with a all-in price, because essentially most clients want to know what they're going to be paying monthly or annually. So some of the providers out there try to refer renting space to equivalent of cups of coffee, to make their building feel cost effective. But essentially, for a space like we're in right now, the only addition to this space was if we wanted bespoke internet. Other than that, everything else is included. The only things we'd pay additionally to that would be stamps for when we send away a post, any phone calls we make, and any meeting rooms we book. Other than that, it's an all-in inclusive price.
Okay, no, for sure. So let's say that anyone listening out there, they're thinking of relocating to London, or looking for office space. I mean, how do they go about it essentially?
There's really sort of three main ways, I guess. Okay. One of them is to turn to the internet and type in search. Essentially, if you look at doing that, and then pretty much anything that you do, I guess very similar to you. If people start searching, all you do is look at the front page, and it's whoever's paid the most for their SEO to be on that front page, or who's the most popular, not necessarily the best value or what you're looking for, or the sort of bespoke solution you want. The other two options are have a friend in property that knows the way around, or alternatively speak to a broker or a web broker. So pretty much what we do. I like to think we're also like that friend of a friend in property.
Okay. You're my friend.
That was good. And so what they can do is guide you through that commercial world of all the different providers, act as a barometer for all those providers. So the client has one conversation and we have 24 conversations. I guess very similar to what you're doing. You have a conversation with all the agents, etc. And then it allows them to be kind of slightly removed from the process, so that you can negotiate on their behalf, take away some of the emotion of the whole process of that, and actually identify some of the locations on the spots that suit best. Quite recently, we had a client that we met via LinkedIn. He had a LinkedIn request out there for sort of 5 days. Had been pitched, all the big providers pitched him. I messaged him. I said, I'm guessing I've come late to the party. You have a little bit. But he goes, tell me what you've got. So I said, well, let me know what you've seen, and I don't want to retrace old ground with you. So we took him out for an hour and a half to look at 4 different buildings he shortlisted 2 of the buildings that we showed him, with one other building that he'd been sourced directly, and in the end he took the space that we provided him, or one of the solutions we sourced for him. It cost him 1,500 quid cheaper than the other option.
Okay.
And he asked me why he wasn't pitched these other ones, and I said because they're not as cost effective to the broker who's going to be giving you the option, so they're not going to make as much money on it. For us, we're very much, because we're a smaller and more niche, the smaller, more intermediate, the sort of medium-sized companies are very important to us, and we can also, because we accompany our clients all the way around, like you do.
Yeah.
We can also save a lot of time. Where he looked at 4 locations that they provided him directly, he spent a whole day doing that. And I said the reason when I'm there, they don't want to tell you their life story.
Yeah.
You know, they want to show you the space. They guess that I've told them about the life story.
Just cuts out a lot of time, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly. It makes it just more efficient, because at the end of the day, probably even less so for me than the people you deal with, is that the people I'm dealing with, they've got a day job, then their day job isn't running around looking for office space.
Yeah, business decision.
Yeah.
And time is definitely money.
Yeah,
right?
where yours is probably a lot more emotive.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, no, okay. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about MBS. We sort of position in the market. You also do, I think, do recruitment as well.
We do. So we work within the serviced and sort of lease search markets in the commercial world. So for some commercial property, we also work with a lot of the service providers in terms of providing staff. So it kind of works quite nicely, because we're aware of current trends, and it helps when we're having those negotiations, because we're aware of, we generally have got key people sat inside the different companies that we can go straight to. So we're smaller, we accompany our clients all the way around, and unlike the bigger providers out there, or the bigger brokerages out there, each sort of client matters to us.
Yeah, so it's a lot more sort of personal.
Yeah. Very much tailored, and we very much try to guide our clients to the right solution, rather than the slightly larger ones that are kind of incentivized by some of the bigger providers. Because we're small, we're never going to bring that number of clients through their doors, so it doesn't really incentivize us.
Okay, I mean, obviously as it's a commercial transaction, I mean, what part does VAT play in the, from, I'm looking for an office, for example, and it's priced at X, I've got to then put my VAT on top?
Yeah, so everything you'll see will always show you excluding VAT, and the idea that companies can claim it back.
Yeah.
And in most cases, they probably can do. And if you're based from abroad, there's ways that you can claim that back as well. But generally, so you'll see your pricing in every scenario without VAT, because they presume that it's an option that you could claim back.
Yeah, no, okay, for sure. So that's great, Matt. How can anybody, so if they're looking for an office or a hot desk in London, how can anybody get in contact with you? Your email address and website?
So my email address is Matt, MATT, at Matthew Blair, BLAIR, solutions.com. And you can look out for us on LinkedIn.
Sure. Yeah.
They could always message you.
Yeah. I'll be most put out if they're like, we're cocktail. I'm like, great, it's commercial. Right, I'm going to pass you over to my friend Matt. But, obviously you would, No, I mean, it's a completely different market to the residential market.
Yeah, and the other good thing is that a lot of our services are free. So if you're in the serviced office world, we do that free, because we've got we'll get our fee from the provider that we put you into. Yeah.
No, fantastic. That's great, Matt. So, if anyone's out there looking, to relocate, or if you're wanting to get some information on the commercial world, and you've maybe been looking yourself and you're just fed up or been put in the wrong direction, do get in contact with Matt. I know we've been joking here, but I've known Matt probably for around 7 years or so, I think. Always beat him at golf as well, but that's another matter. But great. Thanks, Matt, and we'll get you on again soon.
Thanks.
So I really hope you've gained some useful information from our guests today, and thank you again to Simon Martin and Matt Barnes for their contributions. This show is going out over the Christmas festive period, so if you do celebrate Christmas, have a very merry time. I know I'll be tucking into a few mince pies, and definitely my mother's Christmas pudding. I think she makes it in about September, and I suppose it's been, I don't quite know what the word is, maturing in her loft since then, but it's very tasty anyway. So until next week, that's Matt Turner from The Property Show on UK Health Radio.